you could say pop culture, well, how much does that really influence? I think it has a huge influence on a sort of subconscious level of how we perceive certain groups.
And how much has that changed, or is it changing?
It's both an increase in the quantity and in the variety of kinds of points of view, right? Some of it's driven just by the sheer kind of demand for content. There's, I don't know, 600 scripted shows on TV, something like that. And I think that's really exciting that through this sort of explosion in streaming and other shows, we have the opportunity to dip into all of these different worlds and consciousnesses.
You wrote this before the pandemic, but I read it during the pandemic, and I couldn't help but think about the even recent cases of Asian Americans being attacked in some instances because the virus began in China.
It's horrifying what's happening, and yet at the same time, I think it's not shocking. It's, for me, just a reflection of the fact that, to some extent, Asian Americans still aren't seen as fully American, for some segment of the population. And that's both troubling, but also, I hope, opportunity for this conversation to keep happening.
Finally, I don't want to make this novel sound like it's a socio-political tract, because it's extremely funny and entertaining. I know you write for television as well as for novels. Did that come in handy?
Yeah, it's fun. It's like having a sort of other toolbox that I can try to use. Sometimes I, sort of get carried away and I'm just having too much fun. But if I'm having fun with the writing, then hopefully that's fun for the reader. And yes, there's, I hope, weighty stuff in the book, but I also, hope that it's also a story that people can identify, which is about, a background guy who wants to be the star of the show, who wants to have his own story. And that, to me is a kind of universal story. And yeah.
All right. The novel is Interior Chinatown. Charles Yu, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
And thank you, Jeff and Charles Yu. And our March book club selection is Jessica Bruder's Nomadland, which chronicles the lives of older Americans who've taken to the road. We hope you will read along. On the NewsHour Online right now, a resolution introduced in the House of Representatives today would designate March 1st as a National Day of Remembrance for the COVID-19 pandemic. We take a closer look at that effort. It's on our website, pbs.org/newshour. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Judy Woodruff. Join us online and again here on Monday evening. For all of us, PBS NewsHour, have a good, safe weekend. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by Consumer Cellular, Johnson & Johnson, BNSF Railway, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. For more than 50 years, advancing ideas and supporting institutions to promote a better world. At Hewlett.org.
That really well was Jacob Alloy. He's a junior at Hamline University, but grew up in Hawaii.
We hear the cars rushing by as locals try to make it to work and tourists trying to make it to whatever beach they are trying to find on their guide map. You hear the flipping and flopping of rubber slippers, and every so often you catch waves in the far distance.
But Jacob's not just giving us a tour. He's here to teach us something.
So they will come on. I don't know. They said they was gonna come. So I think they were they're not gonna come. For all these guys, whatever.
This is Hawaiian Pidgin. It is iconic and as ubiquitous as shave ice and surfing to the Hawaiian Islands.
Jacob talks to his Auntie Lois, a native speaker, to understand the background and culture of the language.
To me, Pidgin is not just a means of communicating, it's a means of surviving. You're going to be treated as an outcast if you don't sound like them. So it's a way of assimilating.
We also got some funny ones along the way, like Sam Richman and Kevin Gilbert from the University of Albany. They made a podcast about something very dear to them, underrated NFL players.
All right, so I'm going to start things off for show. And so it's like episode 2, by the way. I'm going to Hollywood. I'm going to LA right. It's the LA Rams quarterback, Darius Williams.
The Student Podcast Challenge College Edition will announce finalists and the winner in late March. And middle of high school students, you've still got plenty of time to get your podcast in. For more information on the contest, you can go to npr.org/studentpodcastchallenge. Sequoia Carrillo, NPR News.
Support for NPR's Student Podcast Challenge comes from Blue Microphones. Blue has helped millions of podcasters, musicians, and storytellers to raise their voices for more than 25 years. Learn more at bluemic.com.
You're listening to All Things Considered.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Subaru, whose Subaru Love Promise program donated 50 million meals to Feeding America in 2020 and has pledged to donate another 100 million to support those still in need. More at Subaru.com. From Mathnasium, committed to building math success, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills, with live face-to-face instruction in more than 100,000 franchised centers or online. More at Mathnasium.com. And from Jones Day, an integrated partnership collaboratively providing legal services for more than a century. 43 offices, 5 continents, serving clients as one firm worldwide. Learn more at jonesday.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Kirk from KALW's Uncuffed, Voices from Inside Prison Walls. And I'm very proud to announce that we won another award. This time, the 2020 Award for Community Journalism and Audio from the Northern California Society of Professional Journalists.
We've got the mic now, and we're telling our own stories.
Subscribe to Uncuffed, wherever you get your podcasts.
KALW is made possible by all of our member supporters who help keep KALW strong and independent, including Patricia Silver from Berkeley. Thanks, Patricia. We appreciate your support. And you too can join KALW online anytime by visiting KALW.org. The time is 4 o'clock on 91.7 KALW San Francisco and online at KALW.org.
The operation to capture or kill Jamal Khashoggi was in fact approved by Mohammed bin Salman.
We talked with the country's top intelligence official about the Saudi Crown Prince's role in the death of a journalist.
It's Friday, February 26th, and this is All Things Considered from NPR News.
Shapiro.
And I'm Audie Cornish. Next, coronavirus cases are creeping back up, and the new CDC director has a warning.
We may be done with the virus, but clearly the virus is not done with us.
Also, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo faces a growing number of scandals, including accusations of bullying and sexual harassment.
Later, a gathering of conservative speakers features former President Trump.
And the mayor of Indianapolis on hosting March Madness in a pandemic.
While risks are inescapable, I think we're capable of overcoming them and putting on a healthy and safe tournament.
More after this news.
BBC News. Hello, I'm Tom Watts. A US intelligence report has been made public that says the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved a plan to capture or kill the dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi. He was murdered in the kingdom's consulate in Istanbul in 2018. Barbara Platt-Usher reports from Washington.
The partially redacted two-page report did not cite direct evidence that the Crown Prince had approved the operation that killed Jamal Khashoggi. Rather, its conclusions were based on his control of decision-making in the kingdom, the participation of key aides, and his support for using violent measures to silence dissidents abroad. Saudi commentators declared there was no smoking gun, and the kingdom officially dismissed the report as false, insisting it had done what it could to bring those responsible to justice. Activists and some U.S. lawmakers are calling for Mohammed bin Salman to be held to account.
Following the release of the report, the US government has announced a global policy called the Khashoggi ban, aimed at preventing cross-border threats to dissidents and journalists. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that as part of the policy, visa restrictions have been placed on 76 Saudi citizens. But he said the actions were not meant to fracture US-Saudi relations, which he described as much bigger than any one individual.
the relationship with Saudi Arabia is an important one. We have significant ongoing interests, but we also want to make sure that the relationship better reflects our interests and our values. So what we've done by the actions that we've taken is really not to rupture the relationship, but to recalibrate.
President Joe Biden has said Iran cannot act with impunity, and he warned the country's leaders to be careful. He was speaking a day after US warplanes attacked facilities in eastern Syria controlled by Iran-backed Shia militia groups. At least 17 people were reported killed on the ground in what was the first US military action since President Biden took office. The Pentagon spokesman John Kirby called it a proportionate response to an earlier rocket attack by pro-Iran forces on US positions in Iraq.
We're certainly going to act to protect our people and the forces of our allies and partners. That is an unambiguous, clear message to anyone about what the stakes are if you're going to continue to conduct attacks on our people and the Iraqi people.
Myanmar's representative to the UN has urged other nations not to recognize the military takeover of his country. Speaking to the UN General Assembly, Jormo Tun said no one should cooperate with the Burmese army until it has handed back power to the democratically elected government. In a further show of defiance, he held up 3 fingers, a gesture adopted by anti-coup protesters in Myanmar. This is the World News from the BBC.
This is 91.7 KALW. Good afternoon. The time is 4:04. I'm Joanne Marr with these local news stories. Millions of California's low-income families and undocumented immigrants will receive stimulus payments as part of an economic relief bill recently signed by Governor Gavin Newsom. From our partners at Capital Public Radio, Nicole Nixon has more.
Many undocumented immigrants pay taxes, but they didn't get federal stimulus checks, and they aren't eligible for benefits like unemployment. Governor Newsom says the state must do something to help struggling taxpayers without legal status.
Regardless of your status, those that have been left behind in that federal stimulus, California is not going to leave you behind.
He signed a $7.6 billion COVID relief package that includes $600 checks for millions of Californians. It also sets aside more than $2 billion in aid for small businesses impacted by pandemic closures. Businesses with annual revenue under $2.5 million can apply for the grant.
And I'll bring in some pastel paper.
The House version of Joe Biden's administration's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief.
Looking at my own diagrams.
Oh, awesome. I think I have some notes that you wrote at school too.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Awesome.
Happy about it.
If you expand on.
I'm going to start pastel, and we're just going to do some little bit of abstract, a little bit of technique, and I'll keep the wolves at bay until you're ready to go.
Okay, so they've been asking for pastel.
No, they're just like, I was trying to do printmaking and it wasn't. It's just too much stuff. And I got some paper.
Okay.
Awesome. That's great. That is great.
Cool. Hopefully we can get started from something else.
Do you want some of this stuff?
Supposing I have paper.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to use this for mine, but I'll bring some more in for you.
It's not necessary.
Okay. I just thought so you could have the same as the kids.
Same size. Okay.
Or not, or just the same, like, oh, you've got the rose, or you've got the whatever.
Okay, those are the colors they're going to have.
There are a few others.
Good.
There's some browns and gray.
Like blues.
Let me send myself a note, and I'll look for it. I'll find some ones.
Okay. Oh.
I guess that's good for a landscape, huh?
What's that?
For kind of with a landscape in mind, maybe? Light blue?
The landscape. I just sort of takes a lot of problems in the sky out. I think I'm going to redo the landscape diagram with this simple there's telephone poles.
Okay.
Marks.
Okay, I gotta go. Crocker.
This is, the 7 Mile House is?
Yeah. Okay. My dad lived in that neighborhood for a while.
Is that right?
Yeah. Light blue.
has dropped a bomb into U.S.-Saudi relations?
I mean, obviously, it's going to be challenging, and it's among a number of things that are challenging that the president is managing right now. But I am hopeful and certainly living with the president to keep the channels of communication open and to try to work through these issues. But it's also a part of what we do in the intelligence community, I think, is to try to provide what we see and make sure that it is as clear as possible and that we're providing analysis in this unvarnished way. And I know that's, part of what it is that was hoped for from Congress that we
Well, I was going to ask, because Congress passed a law in 2019 saying you had to provide a declassified version of this report. What was the holdup?
I couldn't speak to what occurred over the last few years, obviously. I think it's not.
It's already written when you came in last month?
There was a classified report that had been provided to the Congress, and we looked at that report and we ultimately considered additional intelligence that had been done since that report had been delivered to the Congress, and ultimately pulled out what we believed could be put forward while still being protected by sensitive sources and methods, and that's something that the law also calls for, is that we provide an unclassified report, but also that we consider what is necessary to protect sensitive sources and methods. So that's what we provided, and it does take time. I mean, to be fair, it is a challenging process in every circumstance. You sort of have to make sure that you're doing it in a deliberate, careful way in order to provide the information that you can publicly.
Was there any dissent, any spy agency that disagreed with this conclusion?
No, there wasn't. I mean, but I think it's, in terms of the ultimate provision of this information, but there was certainly debate and deliberation over exactly what should be provided and how it should be done and so on. So, that is a natural theme of things.
Did your office come under any political pressure in completing this, in declassifying it, or you challenged to soften the finding in any way?
None whatsoever. And I mean, I think that will be clear by virtue of the report's contents that sounds.
What does it do to your relationship as the head of U.S. intelligence, your relationship with your counterparts in Saudi Arabia, that your office has put out a report figuring their crown prince as a killer?
Well, I think, the fact that the crown prince approved that operation and, we rather have assessed that, it's also likely not to be a surprise. And, I am sure it's not going to make things easier, but I think it's also fair to say that it is not unexpected, and I hope we are able to continue to do work where it makes sense for us to do work and to continue to communicate as we have.
We know that the President reached out to King Salman to give him a heads up and talk through the relationship. Have you been in contact with your counterpart?
No, I haven't.
I am thinking Mohammed bin Salman is not just the crown prince, he is the defense minister. Your report states that he is in absolute control of the kingdom's security and intelligence organizations, which makes me wonder about the risk of blowback. If he decides, you know what, I'm not so interested in sharing intelligence with a country that has just written this really mean thing about me. Are you worried?
I hope that we're both able to work together on issues of mutual interest, and obviously many surprising to study the territorial integrity, and our intelligence services have worked closely together over the years, and we have both had opportunities to have bad news in our presses and from our different government institutions, and so we've managed to pursue those issues. So I'm hopeful that the relationship will continue to be what the relationship is, and I also hope that we continue to be able to say what we think when we have those opportunities and when it's appropriate to do so.
Yeah. Last question on this, which is just, again, how you see the risk of damage to the broader relationship. And I'm asking you now as the head of U.S. intelligence, but you've tracked that relationship from purchase of the White House and the State Department and the CIA.
I think too soon to tell in some respects. To be honest, it is not surprising, I suppose, to see a shift in the relationship in some ways with the new administration and new position and a number of challenging issues that we face. together, but it's also, President Biden has been doing this for a very long time and has worked on these relationships, and I think has built those personal ties, and I think there will be ways to water the various storms that we have in front of us.
And we were told that this was going to drop yesterday. Was there any reason it didn't? Was there any change last minute or anything like that? For the report? Can you share what the reason for the delay was? Or?
I think, frankly, it came today as soon as we could make it happen.
Director of National Intelligence at Real News, talking about the Khashoggi report she declassified. It is out today. Saudi Arabia has responded through the state news agency SPA, saying it completely rejects the negative, false, and unacceptable assessment. More of my interview with Haines on Monday. We talk about the state of the intelligence community she now leads after 4 years of turbulence and turnover under President Trump.
Now he is facing a growing number of scandals. First, he was accused of underreporting coronavirus deaths in nursing homes by as much as half. And now he's facing a different allegation that he sexually harassed a former aide. NPR Sally Herships is here to walk us through the mounting criticism. Hi, Sally.
Hi.
Start by taking us back to those days of the pandemic when maybe he wasn't the most popular governor out there, but Cuomo was kind of beloved.
Yeah, it was, and it still is a scary time, and Cuomo was providing these reliable daily press briefings. You could tune in, and he would give you all the stats, and he went on to win an Emmy for them. He wrote a book titled American Crisis, Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic. But I think the most telling is an article that came out last March in Jezebel, a Progressive Women's magazine, titled, "Help, I think I'm in love with Andrew Cuomo, triple question mark." That sort of captures the way New Yorkers, even if they were not fond of his famously firm leadership style, appreciated it during the crisis.
And now the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction, to say the least. There are calls for him to be stripped of the emergency powers he was granted to manage the pandemic, even to be impeached. Tell us about who's speaking out against him.
Yeah, there is definitely a mob with pitchforks coming for Cuomo. In that mob is Republican lawmakers. Cuomo is a third-term Democratic governor. His father was governor. New York does not have term limits, and Cuomo has said he's going to run again. He has been perceived as having a pretty firm grasp on his gubernatorial throne. So politically, if you're a Republican, there is an opening.
And what are Democratic lawmakers in New York saying? Are they part of the push to unseat the governor?
Yes and no, and this is where things get kind of interesting. So in addition to the underreported nursing home deaths, on Wednesday, a former aide, Lindsay Boylan, published a post on Medium claiming that Cuomo had sexually harassed her. He has reportedly denied these allegations. She says he suggested they play strip poker and he kissed her on the mouth. So while Democratic state lawmakers have been very vocal about the nursing home deaths, it's interesting to note that one powerful lawmaker is remaining mostly quiet about the new allegations. That is Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. I wrote to her office earlier today to ask if she would support an investigation into the allegations of sexual harassment, and I have not yet received an answer.
Well, what is the likelihood that there will be an investigation into these sexual harassment claims?
Well, several state senators have called for State Attorney General Letitia James to investigate. There is also the New York State, a group of New York State legislators, staffers who have their own group, the Sexual Harassment Working Group. Rita Pastorell is a co-founder. I spoke with her earlier today, and she pointed out that when sexual harassment happens at the hands of a politician, it can be especially ugly. And that's because politicians have a lot of power. They appoint judges and police chiefs. And so her group is calling for an independent investigation.
We try to have an investigation by people who are not beholden to Cuomo, by FedEx, an investigation by a place that doesn't have supervisory authority under Cuomo or appointment powers under Cuomo.
Sally, you've been telling us about politicians and staffers. What about voters, citizens? Where does Cuomo stand with them right now?
Yeah, I checked with Morning Consult. It's a company that tracks approval ratings, and they said there was no real noticeable change before and after Lindsay Boylan came forward with her allegations. It is important to note that unless an event is on a massive scale, like an inauguration, it can take a while to see changes.
NPR's Sally Herships, thanks for your reporting.
Thank you.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Hi, John Carroll, Director of Development for KALW. These days you hear a lot of talk, but not enough listening to actual conversation. And this is why KALW is a unique refuge. On the station, you'll hear people with different perspectives, who have conversations and not shouting matches. KALW continues to be your independent media source, and we can only offer this refuge only through your investment. It's easy to make your donation, so why not do it now? Go online, KALW.org today. Thanks.
If you're looking for music that's a bit different and unpredictable, a refreshing alternative to what's on the radio, then Folk Music and Beyond is the program for you. Every Saturday at 3, we present some of the finest in American, British Isles, and Celtic folk and traditional music. Live performances by talented artists are also a regular feature of our show. I'm Joanne Moore. Join us for a weekly musical journey on the road less traveled. Folk Music and Beyond, a program that surprises your expectations. Every Saturday from 3 to 5, here on 91.7 KALW, San Francisco.
Saturday nights, join me, Dory Stein, for 4 hours of transcultural, metamorphic, beyond category music radio on tangents. It has the aesthetic of classic, progressive, freeform radio, embracing creative jazz hybrids, roots Americana, and music from all over the world. That's Tangents on 91.7, your local public radio, Saturdays, 8 to midnight.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from iDrive with Remote PC, providing remote access to PCs, Macs, and servers from anywhere, assisting those working from home and also enabling remote assistance for customers at remotepc.com. And from Procter & Gamble, maker of Align Probiotic, a daily supplement to support digestive health containing a probiotic strain developed by gastroenterologists with 20 years of research. More at AlignProbiotics.com.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Audie Cornish. March Madness, the NCAA's men's basketball tournament, is perhaps the most exciting event in sports. It's days of wall-to-wall games, Cinderella upsets, bracket bets based on advanced analytics, or just, who has the best mascot. It's also an event that typically sends dozens of teams and their fans to venues all around the country. 67 games that in COVID-19 times represent 67 potential super spreader events. That's why it was canceled last year. This year, the entire tournament will have one host. Every game will take place at one of 6 venues in and around Indianapolis. So, is the city ready? Well, we spoke with Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett about that.
Well, since last year, Audie, we've hosted over 50 events and conventions throughout the pandemic. Some of those have involved local sports teams. Some of them have been tournament competition in volleyball and cheerleading. So we're practiced at bigger things. Better air filtration, logistics of entering and exiting when crowds come to see events, and event controls. And frankly, the NCAA has now had a season worth of experience in terms of protocols. So, in conjunction with the State Department of Health and our local health departments, we're requiring masks at all the games. There's a limit to capacity of fans at each and every venue. 25% or below will be permitted to actually be physically in the arena. And as you might imagine, all of the teams are being housed in Marion County hotels. for the duration of the tournament.
Is there an emergency scenario where games would be canceled?
Yes, everyone is tested vigorously and regularly. And so if we do experience an outbreak, which we do not anticipate and we hope we can successfully avoid, those games would either be postponed or canceled altogether according to the NCAA's tournament rules.
So you're taking all these precautions, but are there scenarios that you're concerned about, things you've seen other cities go through?
Yeah, I think that after the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay, when the Buccaneers were successful, the fans in Tampa Bay, at least in the TV feed that I was being given, were celebrating without masks. There was no social distancing going on. The protocols that we will follow will ensure that to the extent that there are fans in the building, that they will be masked, they will be socially distanced, and frankly, will apply those same protocols to restaurants, to bars, for people who want to be here for the tournament and want to feel as if they're participating in the activity, but they're doing so from a third-party venue.
I guess the question isn't necessarily can you do it, but should you do it, and is it worth the risk, given the health concerns right now in the country?
Obviously, we are mindful of those risks, and we are taking every precaution to make sure that those risks are addressed. And I do think that while risks are inescapable, I think we're capable of overcoming them and putting on a healthy and safe tournament for both participants and fans alike.
I'm going to put you on the spot for one more thing. The Indiana Hoosiers have a record 12-11. They need a signature win to make the tournament. Purdue has a better shot. Who are you rooting for?
Yeah, I'd like to see as many Indiana teams make the tournament as possible. Now, I'm an IU grad, so I'll acknowledge that IU is near and dear to my heart. But we hope that there'll be several Indiana teams. Hopefully they'll be successful in the course of the tournament.
That's Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
When you've played King Lear, Hannibal Lecter, Richard Nixon, a poet, and a superhero's dad, there are not a lot of acting hills left to climb. But critic Bob Mondello says Anthony Hopkins has found one that might be his sweetest yet, the title role in the film The Father.
Anthony is a proud English pensioner living on his own in a handsome London flat. Well, almost on his own. And his devoted daughter visits him every day.
What do you do here?
What do you think? Anne would love to keep Anthony independent if he'll let her.
So what happened?
Nothing.
Nothing happened.
Oh.
I've just had it on the phone.
So what does that prove?
You can't go on behaving like this.
It's my flat, isn't it? It's incredible. You bursting on me. I have no idea who she is, this woman. I never asked her for anything.
She's here to help you.
Sadly, do what? I don't need her. I don't need anyone.
He's driven away 3 caretakers and is clearly slipping mentally, which wreaks havoc in Anne's life. She's planning to move to Paris. So what's the problem this time?
She was stealing from me.
Angela. Of course not. What are you talking about?
I'm telling you, she stole my watch. Yes.
Your watch?
Yes.
Isn't it more likely you just lost it?
No.
Anne suggests the spot he might look, and he comes back a moment later wearing the watch. Crisis averted. After Anne's left, though, Anthony finds the man in his sitting room. New crisis.
I see it's me. Paul. Oh? What are you doing here? What is it? You live here in my flat? Oh, that's the best yet. What is this nonsense?
French writer-director Florian Zeller is adapting his own play here and using tricks he couldn't on stage. In mid-scene on screen, he can make subtle changes to Anthony's flat, wall colors, light fixtures, so that the character's confusion about where he is becomes our confusion. And Zeller's playing tricks with casting, too. Anthony's daughter, Anne, is played by Olivia Colman.
How did you hear of her? It's not possible.
Except when she's played by another Olivia Williams.
Where's that?
I'm here. I just went down to do some shopping and I'm back now.
Not to mention Zeller's biggest trick. In his play, The Father, the title character was named Andre. In his film, Zeller's cast Anthony Hopkins and renamed the character Anthony.
encouraging us to hear echoes of the Anthony Hopkins we know, the Shakespearean.
I'm not leaving my flat! I am not leaving my flat! This isn't your flat, isn't it? Sorry?
Also Hopkins, the charming old coot.
Tap dancing was my specialty. I'm still great at it. I'll show you. Jolly good. Why you laugh?
And Hopkins, the guy you should never let your guard down around.
I know. She reminds me of. Who? It's Lucy. Lucy when she was younger. Lucy? Yeah. Her unbearable habit of laughing and naming. I did that, didn't I?
Hopkins gives us what amounts to an acting tour de show of force, except when
You abandoned me.
what? He lets the fire go out of his eyes.
What's going to become?
A less level filmmaker might try to pick up the inside mental deterioration with jarring edits or other film tricks. In The Father, Zeller simply presents us with the title character's reality and lets us fend for ourselves. I'm Bob Mandela.
This is NPR News.
Every Saturday evening at 6:30, it's a pleasure to bring you the best of contemporary and classic, bluegrass and old-time music. My name is Peter Thompson, and together with some other wonderful hosts, we're happy to have you along for our musical journeys on Bluegrass Sunday. Please join us Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. right here on KALW, San Francisco.
And here's the Bay Area weather forecast. Clear and chilly this evening with lows in the mid-30s to the mid-40s. Tomorrow, sunny and breezy, cooler during the afternoon. Highs will be in the mid-50s to the mid-60s. All things considered continues now on KALW 91.7. The time is 4:30.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Audie Cornish.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. There are still Texans struggling without power and water. How are they surviving?
It takes about half of these, this cooler to fill up the tank just to flush the toilet.
We'll have more after these headlines.
Live from NPR News, I'm Dwayne Brown. A newly released U.S. intelligence report includes Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince approved the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018, the declassified findings were compiled shortly after Khashoggi was killed, but the Trump administration refused to make the information public. More on that story from Michelle Keller.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken calls it the Khashoggi ban. It allows the State Department to impose visa restrictions on anyone who's working on behalf of a foreign government to suppress, threaten, or harm journalists and activists. The Treasury Department is also imposing targeted sanctions on members of the hit squad involved in Khashoggi's killing at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. The new measures come after the Biden administration released a declassified U.S. intelligence report that affirms what had long been suspected about the Crown Prince's role in the killing. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The unusual winter weather across the South over Valentine's weekend battered multiple states, and reporters traveling with President Biden to Texas today were told FEMA has already distributed $9 million to individuals rocked by power and water woes.
He promptly approved an emergency declaration for 3 states, Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana, and a major disaster declaration for 2 states, Texas and Oklahoma.
That's Homeland Security official Elizabeth Sherwood Randall. Texas bore the brunt of the frigid conditions that left millions of people without heat or running water.
Stocks finished mixed on Wall Street today as gains in tech offset a slide in banks and energy companies. The Dow lost 469 points, down 1.5%. This is NPR. In the Philippines, as COVID-19 cases spiked to numbers not seen in months, the country is getting 600,000 doses of the Chinese vaccine Sinovac this week, donated by China. NPR's Julie McCarthy has that story.
President Rodrigo Duterte's spokesman says a new mechanism to compensate Filipinos who may suffer adverse effects or death from being vaccinated has been signed into law. The lack of such a measure to indemnify vaccine makers against damages has been holding up delivery of vaccines. 117,000 Pfizer doses and over 500,000 shots from Sinovac. Duterte, whose foreign policy embraces Beijing, will be on hand to receive the Chinese vaccine. Researchers in Brazil found it was slightly over 50% effective in healthcare workers, which worries Philippine doctors, nurses, and orderlies. But the government says they are free to decline the Sinovac shot. Julie McCarthy, NPR News.
One of the nation's largest air carriers, United Airlines, will pay the government more than $49 million to settle criminal and civil accusations that the airline defrauded the post office in the handling of international mail. The Justice Department says former employees of United's cargo division falsified parcel delivery information for years. That resulted in United collecting millions of dollars in payments. This is NPR.
Hi, I'm Sonia Nara with the KALW News Team. Start your mornings with us as we bring you a live update on the latest news and information. Tune into KALW just after 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. Mondays through Thursdays for helpful resources from all over the Bay Area. We tell you where to get COVID-19 vaccines, groups offering help, and a lot more. Hear it during our broadcast of Morning Edition, right here on KALW, San Francisco Bay Area.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Indeed, committed to helping businesses hire quality candidates. Indeed's Instant Match searches through millions of resumes to deliver candidates who fit the job description. More at Indeed.com/credit. And from the Jack Kent Cook Foundation, providing scholarships to exceptionally high-achieving students with financial needs from middle school to college. Application for 7th grade students is open. jkcf.org.
From NPR News, it's All Things Considered. I'm Ari Cornish.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. There is a new signal this week that progress fighting the pandemic might be stalling. That warning comes from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in a press briefing today. NPR health correspondent Rob Stein is here with details. Hi, Rob.
Hey there, Art.
We've been hearing good news for weeks that the number of people getting infected and hospitalized is falling. Deaths finally started dropping. Everyone has been talking about how the country may have finally turned a corner. So, tell us what's new today.
Yes, that's right. After a horrific winter surge and losing more than 500,000 lives in the United States, things finally looked like they could turn around. All the numbers are tumbling, but everyone's been holding their breath to see what happens next. And now, the first hints that everything isn't necessarily going to get better have emerged. Here's what CDC Director Rochelle Lorenzi said during a briefing today.
The latest data suggests that these declines may be stalling, potentially leveling off at still a very high number. We at CDC consider this a very concerning shift in the trajectory.
In fact, over the last 3 days, the number of people catching the virus looks like it may actually have started to go in the opposite direction, starting to tick back up again. Even the number of people dying every day appears to have crept higher.
And do scientists know why that might be happening?
Well, some public health experts are hoping it's just a blip, that maybe, it's just a lag in reporting caused by last week's terrible winter storms. But Walensky and others worry that it might be what everyone's been afraid might happen, the coronavirus variants, especially the really contagious variant from the UK. Walensky says it's increased from about 1 to 4% of cases to now about 10% of cases nationally, and may even be more common in some places like Florida and California. Here's more from Dr. Walensky.
CDC has been sounding the alarm about the continued spread of variants in the United States. We may now be seeing the beginning effects of these variants in the most recent data.
And this is happening as millions of people are getting vaccinated, and the U.S. is, we hope, inching its way towards herd immunity. Are you saying we might see a surge before that happens?
Yeah, well, that's the worry, that the country could be seeing the first hints of yet another new surge. But even if the pandemic just plateaus, that's still really bad news. More than 70,000 people are still getting infected every day. More than 52,000 are still hospitalized. More than 2,000 are still dying every day. So lots of people would continue to get seriously ill and die.
So what is the CDC proposing to avert that scenario?
Yeah, so Dr. Walensky is urging everyone not to let down their guard. She knows everyone's really fed up, but she's really worried that some places are starting to loosen restrictions way too soon. Open up restaurants with mask mandates. That's the worst thing that could happen. Here, let's listen to Dr. Walensky one more time.
Things are tenuous. Now is not the time to relax restrictions. We may be done with the virus, but clearly the virus is not done with us.
So Dr. Walensky is just telling everyone to keep wearing those masks, stay away from other people, don't relax restrictions, to give the country enough time to get more people vaccinated. The end could be in sight because of the vaccines, but the virus could take off before enough people get vaccinated, or new, even more dangerous variants could evolve if the virus continues to spread so quickly.
NPR Health correspondent Rob Stein, thank you.
You bet, Ari.
The headliner of this year's Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC for short, is former President Donald Trump, who speaks on Sunday. And despite condemnation from members of Congress like Mitch McConnell in the aftermath of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, today's presenters included a number of Trump's major allies in Congress: Utah Senator Mike Lee, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, and Texas Senator Ted Cruz.
Let me tell you this right now, Donald J. Trump ain't going anywhere.
An indication that many U.S. conservatives still see the former president at the center of their movement. With us to discuss it is Lonnie Chen, a fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institution and the policy director for Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So your old boss is among those who are not speaking at CPAC this year. What does that say about where the support of the party is right now?
I think it's noteworthy. There are a number of key figures in the conservative movement who are not at this year's CPAC conference, and usually, as listeners know, this is kind of the premier gathering for conservatives politically on a year-to-year basis. But you have Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, the former Vice President Mike Pence, the aforementioned Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, people who are not attending at least this year's to the fact that there is a desire among some to put some space between where the conservative movement is and former President Trump, just as there is still a considerable amount of support for the former president, as you can see and hear from the proceedings at the conference this weekend.
Well, Republicans are out of power. They still have 50 seats in the Senate. They're just